It's been very humbling to watch over the last week how many people have made time to make this happen. And one of the things that I want to express, and I express it at every session, is how grateful I am to everybody for making this time, because it really it speaks a lot about each of you, that you care enough about your students and your jobs that you guys are willing to take the extra time to engage in these sessions, share and learn from each other. I've picked up a ton in the last week, and I'm really grateful to everybody for the spirit with which you've all kind of engaged. I'm also grateful to Tiffany, because she's giving of herself today for an hour to lead and facilitate today's discussion on balancing workload. There's a few busier people I know than Tiffany. She seems to be everywhere. So I'm hoping she can help all of us in how she does it. But really, as she said, it's been a difficult and challenging semester for all of us. And if you're anything like, I think, myself and several others, you're exhausted and you're tired and wondering how you could do this again for the spring. And the thing is, I think that we all have some keys to the door, and we can share them with each other and hopefully walk through it together and find a way to the other side. I'm also really grateful to Fountainhead for making these possible. As I've said on many occasions in the last week, it's a kind of a known scientific fact that I'm not allowed to use technology. So that's why Susan Moore has been integral in making this happen. Seriously, bad things happen with the microwave and the toaster if I'm allowed near them. So really grateful that Susan has been just willing to step in over the last 8 days and really the last month to try to get this to happen. So, and Fountainhead's support of us being able to engage with each other in these times is also something I'm very thankful for. So again, just really grateful you're all here, really thankful. If before we start, you all could just make sure that next to your name in your Brady Bunch box that you have your institution affiliation, that would also be helpful. And without further ado, I'm going to do what you all hope that I do, which is shut up and disappear. So I'm going to leave it to Tiffany to manage the rest of this. But again, my deepest thanks and my best wishes to all of you as we go forward together.
Well, I volunteered to facilitate this session, not because I believe I have all the answers on workload management, but because I thought when Joe was reaching out and talking about topics that I thought might be helpful going into the spring semester was something I really wanted to have a space to have a discussion about, because I really feel like we're being asked to do more with less resources. And I equated it to a friend of mine that it's like being asked to do wizardry, but be a muggle, right? So missing out on a lot of the usual things we might rely on to be successful. And I know for me, I work at a teaching institution. So this semester I've taught 4 high flex classes, mask to mask, with 3 different course preps. So that's been really a challenge while running our introductory course. And so that's been something that I've had a lot of opportunities to really reach out to people in my support network to find ways to cope with it, because I tend to be a person who has their life together, but this has just definitely not been a situation where that's been 100% possible. I've really had to ask for a lot of help and then ask my students for a lot of grace this semester, where things just happen. Like I was telling a friend, I not so wisely taught a class on election day and underestimated the kind of emotional aspect of that, and showed up to a classroom with no students there. They either were voting or processing. And so I think that's just been one of the challenges, has been trying to kind of find a new pandemic normal, something that I can, at least handle somewhat under circumstances that are really uncertain. And so I just thought this might be a great space to be able to share your experiences managing it. And I really am excited to learn from everybody about how they've been doing it. But I've been very reliant on different Facebook pages that have had tips. Sometimes I have to get away from that Facebook page where I go, okay, I've had enough. Or I feel bad that these people are making these profound differences in their student's life, and I can't even get a student to turn a camera on. And so it's been just that management of it. But I thought I would start by maybe having everyone introduce themselves and about where they work and maybe a little bit about what they've been facing this semester. And then I thought maybe we could crowdsource some strategies or techniques that we found helpful, because my university has said to me, it's going to be more of the same in the spring. And we have students where they can opt into any modality. So even though I was doing high flex, I was social distance, but with some students fully online. And so my university has very much been about customer oriented to students, but not really thinking about that with faculty members. So faculty, you have to have very specific guidelines to teach online, but for students, they can opt online in any class. So it's been definitely tricky to manage that workload when you're teaching like double or triple the preps in a way, because you've got fully online, some people fully face-to-face, some people half and half. And so I just thought maybe that'd be a good starting point. I know some of you on the call who I've gotten to know through the associations, but I thought that might provide a framework and starting point. So is it okay if I just kind of call out names like how I see them on the Zoom screen? Because I know it's different for everybody. And then if you wouldn't mind sharing just briefly, that would be great. Let's start with Susie.
Hey, Tiffany. Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Prentice. I teach fully online. I did before the pandemic, primarily at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, but I also teach as an adjunct at the University of Central Florida. And I'm now the 7th grade teacher for my son, who is teaching on virtual school. So any tips people have on how to do that better, I am all ears.
Thank you. Let's go to Charlotte.
Hi there. I'm from Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in Tifton, Georgia. And I've got 5 classes. 2 of them were public speaking, and I asked to have them divided because I had 35 people in each class, and that was just too huge. So I arranged it so it was like 20 people in each class, and that was one way I kind of survived, because looking at a class like this, but they're all online asynchronous classes, and a lot of them were freshmen in those classes. And what was my other class? Professional communication. Those people, no problem. But the freshmen were a struggle, and thank goodness, we ended the semester in Thanksgiving. So the university decided not to bring students back, which I think was really smart, but it made a huge crush at the end for us because we didn't know school was ending for Thanksgiving until we were about at midterm. So, but yeah, and like you said, Tiffany, we're anticipating more of the same next semester. Students, public speaking students with 35, let's see, I've got 3 public speaking classes, 35 people each online. So yay.
I know I can't decide if I'm just relieved that the semester's over or worried about the next one, but I think I'm going to need the full period to recharge to kind of get back up and running. Let's go to Lindsay.
Hi, everybody. I'm from Texas State University, and I am teaching fully online this semester, but I'm doing I'm calling them weekly check-ins that are optional. So I'm seeing my class once a week on Zoom if they want to attend. So that's been working okay. And I'm also grad director in my department. So I've been doing all of that online, which in some ways I actually feel has been helpful, because I feel like I'm able to have office hours appointments at very short notice, and it's fine. So that's been maybe one little silver lining for me so far.
Yeah, I know there are some meetings where I'm going, if we could just make this a permanent Zoom instead of in office hours, I've gotten so much work done while just muted and video off. Because we do 10 office hours per week in person generally. So we have to sit in our physical office and then nobody comes. So I've been getting a little bit of time back there, but yeah, definitely challenging. And I can imagine recruiting in this pandemic is really difficult for grad programs when you're losing, usual recruiting opportunities. Let's go to Michelle.
Like Tiffany, I taught high flex this semester, which for me meant I had an asynchronous section, a synchronous section, and an in-person section of the same class. So I had 78 students spread across those 3 modalities. I think for me, the best thing was being able to leave my house every day and go to campus to teach. That escape from the house was really good. I found on the days that I was home, there was never any break. So because there are so many of us in my house who are working, going to school from home, we each have a room. My room happens to be the family room. So I work in the family room, I, entertain in the family room, I hang out with my kids in the family room. There's no real separation. So I think that being able to go and teach on campus was actually a godsend for me.
Thank you. Let's go to Kim.
So my name is Kim Wiseman. I'm at Williston State College. I'm in Williston, North Dakota. I'm at a community college. I'm our only communication person, so I'm on a pretty significant overload. And because of our students not having the readiness to be in college, we have a firm belief if you started online, you will finish online. And if you started on campus, you will finish on campus. I'm in my office on campus. And kind of like Michelle, this has kind of been a nice reprieve for me to actually have a place to go outside of my home because my husband's working from home. And being able to see and interact with students, even though it's incredibly stressful to know who's in quarantine and who's connecting into class that day and who isn't, I have to keep a spreadsheet to keep track of them all. But it's been kind of nice to have that interaction as in a safe way as we possibly can.
Going to Katie.
So my name is Katie Ross. I teach at Pellissippi State Community College in Knoxville, Tennessee, so just down the street from UT. I teach our communication courses, and I'd say that something that has, I guess, helped me is in preparing for the online learning. I was already on my way to making my online learning and pedagogy better. This just kind of pushed me a little bit further, a little bit faster than I was anticipating, but I've collected a couple of tips and things along the way that have made things a bit smoother, all things considered.
Lauren.
Hi, I'm from the University of Arkansas, teaching public speaking and a colloquium synchronously and remotely. So it's worked well. I think to your initial question, it's probably my type A personality that's keeping me, finally a benefit, keeping me somewhat on top of things.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword because then you also have the uncertainty of it all. So it's been interesting. All right, wonderful. Let's go to Rob.
Hi guys, I'm with Fountainhead Press, and again, so glad to have everybody taking part in the forum. I've jumped on a few of these just so I can learn more about what some of your pains are and things that you're looking for improvement in ways that we might be able to help as a publisher and someone who's been basic in your discipline for many years. So again, it's a learning experience for me to see and meet you guys. And sorry, I will put my camera on since I forgot to put it on. But again, it's nice to see everyone. Those of you who are in my territory, it's nice to see and hear from you. And everyone else, again, thanks for joining the symposium. Thanks to Joe and everyone and Susan for everyone for putting it together, and for the presenters. We truly appreciate it. And hopefully I can take a little piece of this and have an opportunity to help some of you down the road. So again, thank you so much.
Okay. Jamie.
Hi, my internet's sort of shaky, so I'm going to leave my camera off in the hopes that it carries a little better. I'm at Georgia College and State University, which is in Milledgeville, Georgia. It is also a public liberal arts school, so I'm on a 4-4 with 3 different preps. I essentially ended up sort of teaching high flex, even though as a public university, we're subjects to the whims of the USG. But those are trying to cover 26 universities around the state, and so it's not practical to have the same regulations for UGA or Georgia Tech that they have at Abraham Baldwin or where I'm at. And so I ended up teaching high flex, never knowing which students would be in the classroom to which days. And even though I had taught most of the classes before, it was just way more stressful than sort of a repetitive prep should be. And I barely had time to open my own research. And I'm in my 4th year, so that's a little bit of a pressing consideration. So it's just a lot about finding the balance and hearing how others have worked through that.
All right, Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Brand. I'm at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Good to see you, Tiffany. This semester, I actually taught an overload because one of our faculty members left. So I taught 3 graduate courses and 1 undergraduate course. The undergraduate course and one of the graduate courses were asynchronous online, and then the other 2 graduate courses ended up being synchronous online with 1 on-campus meeting. And which the students really appreciated. Like, they wanted to be on campus when they could, and then it just created a little more of a community for them. It's unfortunate that it was only 1 time. And it was interesting because we're kind of all over the place with our classes. Some of them ended up being 13 weeks and ending right before Thanksgiving. Some were 16 weeks, but the understanding that anything after Thanksgiving has to be online. And we're kind of doing the same thing, only opposite for spring. So you can start a 16-week course in January, but it'd have to be online. We're not allowed to be on campus until February. So we can then start classes in February if we want and do a 13-week, which is what I'm doing. I'm doing the capstone course, the undergraduate capstone course in the spring, where I'm scheduled to be on campus 3 times, and then everything else will be online. So it's a little bit different. It's really interesting, though. Just 2 weeks ago, we were discussing our fall schedules, and the university had decided that they wanted us to try to increase face-to-face classes up to 25% of our classes to be face-to-face instead of online. And then in our faculty meeting last week, they have changed course and now said we are to go back pre-pandemic and everything should be the way it was before pandemic, with the understanding that we should be able to, on a dime, turn our classes into online classes again. So it's really, really frustrating because it's just twice as much work. Why are we planning classes in multiple ways? So it's been interesting. It's been frustrating in a lot of ways. Kind of like Lauren said, I'm type A, so organized and ready to go. And Katie had said too, like, this kind of pushed me to, I'd done some online teaching already, but this pushed me to do other things. And our CTL, our Center for Teaching and Learning, is really phenomenal. So we have a lot of support to put things online, a lot of tech support and things like that. So that's been really helpful for us.
Going to Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Ackman. I teach at the University of South Dakota. This semester, I taught 3 classes online and 1 class that was supposed to be face-to-face, but we decided as a group that we would just meet once a week online, and then they would do the other activities on their own. I really looked forward to that once a week meeting with those students. Seeing those faces and hearing what they were working on and what they were going through was one of the highlights of my week. I also coordinate our adjunct instructors. So we've got several, maybe 7 adjuncts who teach all online. So I'm sort of their point person. Not any problems there. They're great. It's a great team. So yeah, that's just kind of what I've been working with this semester.
Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne at Iowa State. I'm the basic communication course director here. We're teaching all of our classes online asynchronously, our public speaking course. And so one reason that this panel really appealed to me when I saw it, and thanks for organizing, Tiffany, was because we have about 20 graduate students teaching the course. And I know that it's been a real challenge for many of them, as it has been for us too, to kind of deal with workload and time management, because all of our classes are online. And so I think there's this sense that there's no way of sort of escaping the feeling of constantly having email rolling in. And then a lot of students are, of course, facing extenuating circumstances. So I think an uptick in instructors getting requests for extensions and needing kind of modified schedules and things like that, and working one-on-one. So I'm also housed in the English department here, along with the introductory composition courses, which another faculty member directs. And I know that across our classes, we're trying to do some additional renewed training focused on time management and workload management in the spring. And so I was just kind of curious to hear from others what's worked for teaching online and trying to manage time and have some sense of separation between work and other tasks that mark the day. Thank you.
And then I think we have quite a few reps from Fountainhead, and I know Joe is hanging out to help us out. So did I miss anybody I think I got everybody? Okay, so I thought I would open up by asking about, like, I like to talk to my students about being reflexive and thinking back. So I thought about, what would I tell my week one self? Now, I will honestly admit that I had a bet going with my colleagues about how long we would actually make it in the face-to-face format. And I had been on the pandemic task force all summer, which was really stressful. And so even knowing everything I knew about spread, I thought there was no way we were going to make it 3 weeks. So I planned my semester thinking we would be online very quickly, and that did not happen. And so we actually made it all the way. We did a 14-week before Thanksgiving, and then the last 2 weeks fully remote planned. So I was just curious about time-saving tips you would tell your week one self going into the next semester. So for me, something that's really worked well has been sending weekly reminders to my students that have also been helpful for myself to think about, oh, that is what we need to be prepared for. But I thought putting up a resource page with links and everything was going to be sufficient, but I found that's actually been the opposite. Some of my students have been very confused on when they were supposed to show up, not show up, because we have kind of staggered attendance. And then midway through, I had so few showing up that I just let everybody come because I was not having enough attendance. But I found that's really been helpful for me, keeping everyone grounded. And then I've been trying really hard to send a message of support every week, acknowledging, thanking them for following safety practices on campus. We are halfway, trying to provide markers. And so I've gotten a lot of feedback from students that that's been helpful. Then they went, oh no, that lit review I was supposed to start week one, I probably should be finishing by Thursday. And so that's been really helpful. I've been having less issues with students going to the wrong Zoom room, or it's most problematic if they show up to class when they're not supposed to and there are not enough chairs. And so I found that that's been really helpful for me to kind of keep all my classes organized, and then just providing more touch points because I'm not seeing some of them at all. So I've found that that's been helpful for me to provide weekly updates and reminders of things to look out for. Or I've also put stuff in like, this is the drop deadline for the semester, or you need to be meeting with your advisor to register for classes. So I've been trying to kind of insert what the provost and dean and chair have been asking us to share in a way that feels authentic and not just like I'm dumping 17 policies that we want to remind people to wear a mask properly or withdraw if they need to. So I found that's kind of been helping me to mark time this semester. And then we finally got to this week and I went, okay, it's final exam week. You need to remember to take your final on this particular day. So I found that's been helpful for me to keep organized, just to provide weekly reminders. And I got that idea from some of my friends who've done a lot of online instruction. That's much more important because you don't really have the like in class, hey, by the way, remember to do this, because some of my students are joining right at the beginning of the call, or maybe haven't had the chance to watch the video recording. So that's something I've tried that I think I'll be repeating next semester. But I wanted to hear from others about things that you're like, this really worked for me. I was really, I would repeat that. There's lots of things I wouldn't repeat that I did this semester, but that was one that I thought was helpful. Oh, I like that, Katie. Oh, week one, to ensure all due dates are listed and accurate. That's great. And I think students can set up notifications too, because some of my students get notifications in their LMS that something's graded or something's due. And so I think that is really helpful. What else?
Well, I'm thinking, and so I've attended a few of others of these sessions and have heard others speak well of doing things like having designated email checking hours every day too, and then communicating that to students so they know when you're online, setting boundaries like I check email through 5 p.m. but not afterwards, knowing that, if you send me an email, you should wait 24 hours, we expect a 24-hour turnaround, things like that, kind of boundary setting regarding technology that might help students. And I also got a good tip from someone who suggested like a general questions discussion forum online, and maybe some extra points for helping peers out in that forum for responding to questions, so that the instructor is not the only one that's giving, having to respond to questions, but they're kind of helping each other out in that setting.
That's a great suggestion. I know at my school, we have students that this has mostly been student initiated. This was not a faculty suggestion, but they have created group meetings for all of their courses where they can ask their peers questions. So sometimes I don't even hear the question. They said, oh yeah, I was going to ask you, but I popped it in the group meeting and 3 people replied, you need to read the syllabus. Or, Dr. Wang's talked about that like 3 weeks ago. And so they have one, and then I work at a smaller school, about 3,000 students, and we have maybe 75 majors. And so that's been a good way for them to kind of keep in touch with their peers. They all have oral comprehensive exams this week. So I found out through some of my students that they had built an entire Google Doc of historical questions that had been asked at comps for the last 5 years, and they had plugged in alumni feedback. So I feel like our students maybe I would benefit from learning about how to organize that information. I was impressed that they had been that organized, but they had all of our historical questions that have been asked. And then after every single interview, they were updating it with more information. So I don't know if my colleagues would be thrilled to hear that that was what was going on, but I can't really fault them for working together and working collaboratively. And so I've been trying to encourage that, especially with group work, which has been really hard because you have people in different modalities in the same group. So some of them are in the in-person, some are in the online. And so I've been trying to set up breakout room spaces for them to work in class time, which has worked really well too, just having a space, and I just have it available. And then if they don't need the time, letting them leave the room, that's fine. But I've been doing that, and then just kind of jumping around the different breakout rooms to get feedback and see how, checking in with how students are doing. Okay. Oh, I like that idea too. Katie's talking about a grading note spreadsheet for common notes. I think that's a great idea to save time, because I feel like our students make the same kinds of errors, especially in public speaking. I'm going, don't read your notes, right? Look at the screen. Yeah. And then, I think it's very possible to do a group me for instructors too. I like that idea too. You just create one, and then it puts you have to input the cell number of the person, but I could see that being really good. I know my department, we have a Slack channel where we have different common concerns we're experiencing. And then I know my colleagues and I have a group chat in place where we do that. But yeah, and I like that it gives you notifications when there's new posts, which I really like. And so we've been doing that. And I have to give props to my chair. I thought this was going to be really corny and not that great, but she set up a Thursday session where she asked everybody what they're proud of that they've accomplished this week. And it's varied from everything I bought myself Little Debbie tree cakes and enjoyed them and took a break this week, to, people getting a pub, or, successfully having a great group discussion. But that's really kind of given us a great space to kind of talk about things where it's gone well. And then we've also been able to troubleshoot and say, hey, the heat's not on today. Can we get that taken care of? And so I think that kind of threaded approach is helpful. I know some of my colleagues have been using Discord, but we've had some concerns with tech regarding privacy with Discord. So we've been using Slack and GroupMe, at least in my institution. Just seems to work well for us because there's so much email. And so we've been trying to kind of have that more, conversational space. Other ideas?
It's interesting that all of you have had such great experiences with GroupMe, because what I would tell my week one self is to make it clear to my students exactly what GroupMe can and cannot accomplish, and it may be a function of such a large class too. But 1 or 2 people would get on there and start complaining, and then that would bring everybody down, or 1 or 2 people would share the wrong information. And so I would get 15 of the wrong assignment because they listened to what was on GroupMe. So my experience with GroupMe has not been anywhere near as positive as everyone else's, but that may also be a function of the size of my class. The other thing that I was going to say was to pay attention to the channels. One of the things is that students talk about is I have 5 different teachers and they do things 5 different ways. And so looking back at my week 1 self, I would have picked my favorite 2 or 3 tools and simply used those all semester instead of trying to, like use Padlet because I really wanted these open-ended items, and using Turning Technologies because it helped me take attendance, and using kind of videos in our LMS because they did something else. So I think now just knowing that if I choose these 2 or 3 technologies, that's sufficient for the students. And I encourage them in their group projects to choose one channel. I don't care which one they choose, but just choose one. Everything that we seem to know about small group work says fewer channels dedicated to that specific project tends to work better.
I know I have some students that have just wanted to do cloud-based, where they've just been doing a Google Doc or a Google Slides or different. So it seems like I find it interesting what they've chosen. Some have chosen GroupMe, some have chosen that. Others like the Zoom room where they just sit and force themselves to work, which some of them, that's more than they have put into the project in the past. But I think it's interesting, and they have started to, at least in my classes, hold themselves accountable. Like they would shoot a text and go, "Why are you not in the Zoom room? We're having class right now," and the person appears in Zoom. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors that class size could play into whether that would be effective. Because I could imagine 70 something people, that'd be overwhelming. You could get all sorts of quality type information or information that's wrong or misinformation easily. Okay, I'm going to go next to talking about different ways that campuses have been addressing the increased workload, because I'm curious. My school has moved toward allowing people to freeze their clock for the year, or if they've already frozen it before, freeze it a second time. So for example, if I had frozen it for medical leave, I could freeze it a second time. But there's been concern about how this year in general is going to be treated from an assessment like a reporting standpoint. So my school, we do faculty activity reports every year where we write about what we've done. But I've heard from a lot of peers that they're very concerned, like, this is going to look really bad, even if I freeze the year, that I didn't get any research done because I was just trying to get by in my classes. Or, my committee that I'm doing service on hasn't met as frequently because it does campus events, and we haven't been having in-person events. So I've been hearing a lot of that from my colleagues who are tenure track, that's been really concerning, or the university's just been asking them to do more, like, summer in advising. We usually do group advising, got converted to every student's being advised one-on-one on Zoom, which was really time intensive when you're used to just advising 5 at once. So I was just curious about if that's being compensated, if that's even being acknowledged. My school just sends a litany of, "We're so proud of all you've done. Thank you for all your work. We know these are tough times," but hasn't really been backing that with any help. They just kind of keep sending "thank you for, unprecedented times require for unprecedented level of effort." And I think, from what I'm reading on Facebook with my faculty friends, hasn't been really ringing true with faculty. They're like, well, if they would actually acknowledge what I'm doing in other ways besides thank you, it would be helpful. But I'm curious if maybe other schools are doing a better job than mine is. Or
I was just going to say, Tiffany, like everything pandemic related, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of forethought that goes into decision making and thinking about the implications or the ramifications of those decisions. So for example, deciding that we're going to stop at Thanksgiving partway through the semester after schedules have already been planned, or changing drop dates or withdraw dates. And the same thing with the tenure clock. I don't think people understand that when you pause your tenure clock, there are real economic implications for having done so, because most universities do a bump at tenure and promotion, and then they also base your raises on your base salary. So over the course of a lifetime, people can lose anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 by pausing tenure clocks. So I just don't think that we're really thinking through everything. It's like, I have to make a decision today. And so that's what we tend to be doing.
Yeah, and there hasn't been a lot of coaching on whether it makes sense to pause somebody's clock, because there are people where they're going, I'm pausing my clock, and I'm thinking to myself, knowing about that person, they'd be better having that clock run. They probably got enough that they would be okay, but they're not really receiving any help, like, or guidance, which I find concerning. Like, I had a colleague that was like, well, my research hasn't been great, but I'm thinking to myself, you've met the standards for research to get tenure promotion. I would keep the clock rolling. But then you're like, do I say that if I'm going to be on their tenure committee? And so I've been pretty frank. I've been like, you need this many pubs, you've got them. I would keep the clock rolling for financial reasons, because my university is looking at it as a cost savings. I hate to say it, but when they were even talking about an option, that's one selling point I, told the president, because he was like, well, as faculty senate president, what do you think we should be doing? And I said, I feel like we should have the option, but people shouldn't be forced to. Like, they should be given the opportunity. And I said, it could be a cost savings to the university if they opt not to. That's one less, year where you have to bump that salary. And so, I was trying to get the process through, but yeah, I mean, it has real financial ramifications to doing so.
One of the things I've been most frustrated with along those lines is a lot has been left to the discretion of the departments, like whether to count this semester's evaluations in our tenure portfolios or not. Oh, that's a part. But when we have people on our tenure committee who from across the university to not have like sort of a standard, and they're like, oh, we'll take it into consideration. And a verbal commitment to take things into consideration is not perhaps the most soothing, or doesn't make me feel like it will be consistently taken into consideration, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think the same goes with evaluation of teaching. Maybe we have optional where you can, or you can choose not to, or include your evaluation data. But I worry that it's even going to be a meaningful sample size with our students being, they're now remote, right? Trying to get them to do an online form when they're used to filling something out on paper. And if I don't include it, does that automatically have my chair assume that I didn't teach well this semester? Where it's kind of those decisions. And they've talked about it being only the instructor receiving the feedback and no one up the chain, but they're still, storing it in the cloud storage. And so we've had a lot of issues with trust there with administration. Are they going to really actually take it into account? Are they actually going to consider that these are, very difficult circumstances, and we're, making every effort to accommodate students, with these, but, what is it going to look like for faculty? Trying to see where we're at. I know a lot of you came on the call because you had interest in working with specific populations. I know we've all been dealing with that, but it's made even more challenging when we're working with other individuals who I talk to my students about acknowledging privilege. And so I know that I work with adjunct faculty in my department, and we have instructors who are not tenure line and are on renewal contracts. So I was curious about ideas for working with adjuncts and instructors at universities that you found effective, because I think we had to cut some sections at my school, which was really hard to tell people they had a teaching opportunity and then call them back and say, hey, enrollment's not there. We're not going to be able to do that next semester. It felt really awful. And it wasn't anyone's fault. They had done probably a better job than we had with the transition to online because they had more experience. But my chair had to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, we might want to have you back in the fall, but we're just not seeing the spring enrollment. So I was curious, if I know several of you work in basic course roles, how that's gone over with folks who are in, non-tenure line or tenured positions.
I guess I'm a department chair and I've had to make those calls, and it's not pleasant. That adjuncts don't get paid well already. And then I felt terrible having to say, sorry, but our budgets don't allow, and with our enrollment where it is. But I guess I'm always reminded that is my job. And I try to do it in the nicest way possible, even though it really kind of sucks to be that person.
Yeah, and I know a lot of places are, I think we've saved a little bit where people aren't having to commute in, or we're able to accommodate, an online platform, but it's still not even close to paying enough I looked at how much it would cost to drive from Birmingham to my campus gas wise. And I'm like, not sure they're making any money. I mean, maybe gaining more teaching experience, but something I struggle with, with that where you're teaching multiple places seems challenging. What about graduate students? Anyone had, I don't have graduate students at my institution, but I know many of you do, things that have worked well, because I can't imagine going to school and taking classes and teaching classes in a pandemic. Seems doubly hard.
I think that was one of the hardest things. They felt like the sandwich generation, and I've talked about this before at one of the sessions last week, because they're expected to be kind of like employees and faculty, but they're also expected to be like undergraduate students in particular. And their mental health has been a significant piece of the puzzle, because many of them are used to being in a cohort environment. And almost all of the graduate classes ended up online because they were small and it was easier to do it that way. So their mental health, I think, probably suffered even more than our undergraduate students' mental health. But those check-ins are really important for them. We didn't do it, but a lot of places had kind of their Friday afternoon happy hour on Zoom. And so everybody would come with their favorite beverage and they would just sit and chit chat. And that seemed to be effective in many graduate programs.
Thank you. That seems helpful to give for more formal check-in and then informal space. Any other ideas?
Yeah, one thing that we did, so another colleague and I, we set up like a weekly Zoom meeting for graduate students to come in and just, have a space where they could ask us questions. And we started off gearing it towards like the TAs in particular, but we really opened it up to anyone. And so they could talk about teaching, they could talk about their classes, they could talk just anything that they wanted to. And so we just had just 30-minute time. We did it before one of the common classes and stuff like that. And so we had different people coming in and out each week, but it seemed to be a good kind of just way to let a little bit go that week.
Thank you. That's helpful. I know my university's been doing it for faculty, where they've had, they call it like pandemic PD or something. I haven't managed to time manage well enough to make it to one of those sessions yet, but they do it Friday afternoon. And I'm like, I made it through the week, whatever, 12. The last thing I want to do is do one more session, but I found that that's been helpful. A lot of faculty have been utilizing it. Okay, great.
And I think, we did it on a Wednesday. And so kind of like that hump day thing, because we didn't want to do it later. And people were starting to, you could see it's like they were ready for the end of the week by Wednesday, but it was just kind of a good way to just kind of rejuvenate and see other people, like they weren't alone, right? Other people are experiencing some of the same frustrations.
I think I'm going to flip the discussion. I think we've talked a lot about teaching, but I know many of us are having to keep the service and research balls going as well, which I find like teaching, I kind of have to do. I mean, that's where I'm getting paid to do. And, but I found it really hard to keep the other pieces going during this pandemic, at least personally. I want to hear if there's any ideas you might have on the scholarship front, because that's been really hard. We have no travel money currently, so people who are traveling to do scholarship can't. We've had, it's been hard for people to complete grants in some cases, or sabbatical projects, or, we do early career grants at my institution. So we found that people have just been struggling to cope with just the teaching pieces. So the research has kind of fallen on the wayside. I'm really thankful. If I didn't have research teams keeping me accountable right now, I think I would have probably checked out at this point. Or I don't know how it is at Fountainhead, but I've had my publisher contacting me and going, hey, can you get me a glossary in the next 2 weeks with all of your terms for your textbook? And I went, it is finals week, but I got it done because like in my heart, I need to beat the deadline and be early. But that was not what I was looking for the last week of the semester. Can you make a glossary? Can you get us all these native image files? And I'm going, oh my goodness, like this is way off, but I know they've got to hit a production schedule. And so it's been kind of like telling my past self, why did I agree to do all these things, right? Where you're just kind of, well, I agreed before the pandemic, but any ideas on that, kind of keeping the research going? Because I know for a lot of folks, that's making sure we can get the tenure and promotion, or for me, promotion to full is important to me. So trying to kind of keep something going.
In my department, I've been facilitating a writing group for the past few years. And so I call it mindfulness and writing group. So we start with like a mindfulness meditation and then we work. And when we went online last semester over spring break, we decided we would just keep doing it. So we're doing it over Zoom every week. And then this semester, we actually added a second day. So depending on who wants to make it, some people will go twice a week and some people will only go once a week if only one day works for them. But it's been a nice way to kind of create some sense of routine and like protected hours to be doing that kind of work.
I love that idea. And it also, I think, addresses what we were talking about earlier, how everything is becoming blurred, the home, work, or work and life. So I like that, having that dedicated time blocked out. And I mean, I know I've been just blocking out self-care time in my calendar. It sounds kind of crazy, but just like going, okay, I'm doing no Friday afternoon meetings, or I do no office hours on Friday to give myself something. But it's been trying to schedule that, because otherwise it's so easy to just kind of get locked into Zoom. And then I go, wow, it's been 7 Zoom hours today. I think today's only 5 Zoom hours for me, but yeah, it's so easy to get sucked in. And then the idea that you were always available because you've got Zoom, you hop on Zoom. I'm horrified sometimes with where my students have been hopping on Zoom from. I'm going, which I understand there's access situation, but I'm like, okay, don't drive the vehicle while on Zoom. Have somebody else drive. Maybe sit in the car and Zoom. Okay, but it's just trying to kind of get that. And my colleagues too, where we're all kind of from different spaces. Where I've had my dog Zoom bomb half of things. I know we're on Zoom still. Other ideas for research?
I'm not great at it, Tiffany, but a piece of advice that I was given that works really well is after you get your teaching schedule, you put that on your calendar for the entire semester, and then you pick a 1-hour block of time that is available each day, and you automatically block it out the same way that you block out classes. And that's your writing time. That's research time out of every day. And then you take another hour and you block it out for self-care. And then after all of that, you can start building in like meetings and those kinds of things. But once those things are on your calendar, you have to be really dedicated to not let anything move them. And I think that's really the hardest part of doing it, is saying no. Just as you would say, no, I have a class then, you say, no, I have research time then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I have colleagues that do one day if they can swing it and stack all their classes, where they have a writing day or half day. And they tell me if they don't have a sabbatical, that's the only way something gets done with their load. But I love that idea to do it daily and not just like a half day or periodically, because otherwise I fear we wouldn't get anything done right now. Just kind of, I found like, have you all played the whack-a-mole game where you go to the carnival and you whack? I feel like it's been one of those semesters where just as I get all the moles whacked, like another one appears, and I'm going, like the glossary for a 300-page book out of the blue. And I'm going, where were you last week when I was on Thanksgiving and I watched 12 Hallmark movies to tell me that I could have been working on that? And so I think that's been, challenging. Other ideas on the scholarship front?
I go hide in my office. I know somebody else mentioned this too, but yeah, I just have me, my retired husband, retired, emphasis on retired, so he's home all the time, and 2 dogs who live under my desk and then blast out every time somebody comes to the door, which is frequently these days. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm teaching online, but I go hide in my office where I can actually get something done and not be interrupted, because people think I'm at home. So works great.
I love that. I saw in chat, Tracy was talking about having passing time or like a break gap time. I think that would be great for Zoom fatigue too, to just step away. Like I turn my ring light off when I'm not in Zoom because I find it's a little bit headache inducing, but I think that's great. I've also built in drive time and extra buffer time for tech to fail, because that's been something where I've been doing classes at school in person, and then I've been doing office hours at home because they're wanting to de-densify the building. So it takes me 30 minutes to get to and from work, giving myself an hour or an hour 15 to get a coffee, or, I enjoyed that the other day. I got, one on Fountainhead, which was nice to be able to get a coffee on Fountainhead, but getting a coffee or making sure I eat lunch or things like that I would do in person. But it's harder when you're kind of moving spaces. The last thing I wanted to talk about is a little bit selfish on my part. But one of the things we've been talking about in the Regional Professional Association I do a lot of service with is professional development, which I think has been really hard. And so I'm curious about what professional development opportunities have looked like during the pandemic. Like, I think about, I could sure use a time management workshop, or I know many of us have. I looked at all the sessions and went, I wish I had time or the schedule worked that I could go to more of these sessions. But I found that's been really hard, especially even NCA. I went to virtual NCA, but it just wasn't the same. Like, I went to what I was supposed to present at and show up to, but I found I didn't wander into as many sessions as I would normally. So I'm curious about if there's things that you've been doing with your campus or community or your friends that have been helpful in that. Or I know Wendy Atkins-Sarah and I were talking about on Facebook about whether associations could step up in providing more free professional development or access to that. And I was just curious about what might be helpful, because those are questions, we talk about going, if we can't offer somebody an in-person convention, what's the incentive to be a member or to have that association community? So I was just curious, and this is really selfish on my part asking, but I'm like, if I'm going to make it to different things, what would be helpful to have, or even during the year things? I know Western is doing some during the year webinars because they're going to, not have a convention this coming year. So I'm curious about that. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of different campus initiatives.
I almost think that there are too many professional development opportunities at the moment, and trying to figure out where all of them are and cull through which ones are going to be most beneficial is a huge time taker. We have tons of things going on our campus, particularly to help people learn how to teach in different modalities. We have things going on about how to use technology. We have how do you do research in a pandemic types of things. There's lots of associations that are doing things. So when there's a group of things like this was, and I can go down the list and say, okay, I want to go to these 7, that was significantly easier. I found NCA's approach to be not beneficial for the attendee. I think it worked for some presenters, but as an attendee, I found it very frustrating to navigate.
I think there have been so many professional development opportunities, but a lot of them, that started back in March, and there's been a lot on DEI and lots of talking about things, and I've heard a lot about a lot of things. The one I keep trying to find now are the ones that actually have a product at the end. So it is that I'm using that work time to create something, whether that's a writing workshop in which we're working on editing each other's abstracts, or we're something that's got that built-in force me to focus and get something done in the time frame that I'm committing.
Yeah, and I've seen some of my colleagues have talked to me about, I haven't done one personally, but faculty learning community things where you have a shared product or goal. I know my friend Sarah and I went to Nebraska together, and she talked about how she did a faculty learning community focused on service learning, which was really helpful for her. But I agree, right? If you're just going, then at a certain point, right, you just hit information overload and then you're trying to process all of that. But I like that idea of having some type of end product or accountability function in there, or something where you can look at it, other people's examples. Other ideas?
I really like that idea too, Tracy. I'm wondering if it would work to prepare, let's say, graduate teaching assistants for the spring semester. Like if maybe over the break, or when we're back in January, or whenever the semester starts again for you, maybe that week before, get together with the graduate teaching assistants online and just say, okay, by the end of this hour, we're going to have these modules created, or this assignment taken care of, or something like that. Does that sound like a crazy idea?
I don't think so. I think, anything that, we did a lot this summer with actually having our graduate students develop the online curriculum for other faculty. So they were partnering and they were working in teams on how to transition some things. And those were really good experiences for our grad students, but it was also helped our faculty that really didn't have time to do a good job on finding some of that stuff. That partnership of working in those small learning communities worked really well. And a lot of our faculty worked with students that were not in the same discipline. So they got some of that cross thought concepts going on too.
That's really cool.
And I know some of the teaching and learning centers, my friend is associate vice provost at one, they actually paid faculty to do professional development, and then they had end outcomes, like you had to have a completed online course. So they did certifications. Mine was just like you have to do it because you will not be employed if you don't complete this required training. But I know others use different approaches where they said, hey, we'll pay you a small stipend with COVID money to get up on things, but you have to have a syllabus completed or a certain number of modules. And so she said that the completion rate was very high. They got everybody on board, and a lot of them, they hadn't even thought about doing online and were kind of forced to in the pandemic. I have a colleague who did Quality Matters, where our dean sponsored a certain number of people to get certified. I was just exhausted. I was like, I don't think I can do one more thing. But a lot of my friends did that and really upped their online teaching capabilities. So I think those are all great ideas. Okay, well, we've got probably just time for one more question, but I always ask, did I miss anything? Something that you wanted to talk about, bring to the table, or were curious about? I hate when you read a description and go, I really wanted to ask about that or get ideas, and then it doesn't come up. So I tried to hit everything I put in the one sentence description. I try.
I have a question for people. Many campuses have elongated out the break to give people an opportunity to recover, but also to give kind of that 2 weeks after the holidays for potential quarantine, isolation, all those kinds of things. What are people doing with that time to make sure that they're resting and rejuvenating rather than trying to do all the things that they didn't get done in the fall semester?
I wish I could say I was going to rest and rejuvenate, but I fear I'm going to be one of those people getting caught up. I have a Netflix watch list of things that I'm planning to watch. And we joke about it, but I mean, I think I've watched every Hallmark Channel movie premiere this month. But I think that is important, thinking about having that space. I know my school, it's so pragmatic. It's like about having enough time for people to test. And we sent test kits home with everybody with COVID money. So making sure they're having time to test. And now we're talking about, I think, the first 2 weeks remote and then the last 14 in person due to COVID spread. But I know I'm in a state where we have had terrible community spread. I know some of you are just across the border, but in Alabama, we've had terrible, even with a mask ordinance since July, we're still having problems with people not complying with government ordinances. So I know it's been real stressful, but is anyone losing a spring break? That came up with some of my, we are keeping our spring break because we felt like it was going to be worse mental health wise for people to lose that. But I worry about that, for many of my friends, losing breaks where you would have had a time to breathe and kind of reset, and it's gone. But some of you have a spring break that's diffused across the semester. I fear students might just take more than the day break. I don't know. But
it's been interesting to listen to our administration advocate for those. So our 5 days are moved across the semester. They start in February and they end, the week before classes end or whatever. But making sure that everybody knows those are supposed to be faculty break days too, and that we're not, so they're moving meetings and they're moving some things. The interesting part is the first one is the same day as our higher ed pedagogy conference is scheduled. So we start with, we're all going to this conference that day anyway here, but the rest of the time you should be doing this. But we know our students are going to take, when they've got, I think it's Tuesday after Easter, we know they're not going to show up on Monday.
Well, I hate to cut a conversation short just as I feel like it's getting started, but I know many of you have another Zoom to go to or papers to grade, but I just enjoyed seeing all of you on the call, and feel free, I think they've got all of our contact information, but feel free to reach out, or I might be reaching out to some of you. I learned so many great ideas, but thank you so much. I enjoyed seeing all of you, and best of luck with ending out the semester.